Now it's Sparage taking the shot, scores!
What a move! What a goal! How about that?
It handles its way to the net, scores! Oh my goodness!
What's going on, everybody? This is NOJHL Game Day, the podcast edition once again, obviously. Thank you so much for tuning in. Alex Bastyovanszky here. The first round of the playoffs were absolutely phenomenal, as we thought they would be. Joining me today to review what went down in the opening round and to preview what's coming up in round two are a few of the esteemed broadcasters from across the league. Let's bring them in now, one by one. First of all, Thomas Mercier, the commentator for the Sudbury Cubs and Espanola Paper Kings, but, you know, we won't talk about that too much, obviously, because the Cubs are our main focus as we go forward here. And Richard Whitty from Iroquois Falls, who Storm faced the Cubs in the first round. And he might be hurting a little bit, but he's going to add his commentary on what went down in that series. And we've got Andrew Audio from the Timmins Rock to tell us all about the Soo Eagles series, which was a fascinating one. Definitely one of the best of the opening round. And finally, Dennis J. Puska, the legendary voice of the Hearst Lumberjacks, who's going to tell us about the Jacks and their opening series against Powassan. First of all, gentlemen, all together once again, thank you so much. How's everybody doing?
Very good, thank you.
We're doing great, buddy.
Excitement off the charts. Well, Richard, I know you got all the time in the world now, don't you? So it was easy to get. Richard, how's retired life, by the way? I got to ask you.
Retired life is pretty good. I still do some piecemeal work for stuff that's lucrative. And like today, I was supply teaching at a high school, and it's great. Work when you want to. Yeah.
Well, you got a little bit more time in your hands now that the Storm, unfortunately, are out. But what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about that Storm series. We're going to review everything that went down in round one, guys, and we're going to talk about what's upcoming in round two, do some predictions, and just have a good old time with it. So let's start off with Sudbury taking down Iroquois Falls 4-0. You know what? I mean, aside from game one, which was, I believe, was 7-1 Sudbury, guys, in the opening one, it was close. The rest of the games, 4-0 sweep for the Cubs, but kudos to the Storm. They battled hard in this series. Let's just go, Thomas. Let's start with you on this one. What were your impressions of the series?
No, I think you summed it up perfectly. Aside from game one, it was a very competitive series. Again, I didn't call for a sweep. I'm very surprised it was a sweep, and I'm sure Richard could agree with me. I think Iroquois Falls' chance to win a game in this series was in game three. That was the real opportunity for them. But, after that seniority overtime goal in game three, you kind of had a feeling that the series might be over. But that's not to discredit how well the Iroquois Falls Storm played. They played a fantastic series despite being swept. And what really shifted the momentum kind of towards Iroquois Falls a little bit was when Justin Sullivan was pulled and Maverick Fletcher came in. He nearly single-handedly changed the landscape of this series. So I think Maverick Fletcher did really give the Iroquois Falls Storm a chance. But again, there's a reason the Cubs are the defending champions. There's a reason why they run the regular season title this year. Just the offense was too much for them to handle. And we talked about how the goaltending was going to be a problem potentially for the Cubs against Iroquois Falls. But man, after, game two looked a little shaky for Carson Chartier, but you know what? He turned it around big time in games 3 and 4. He picked up one of the BrokerLink 3 stars of the week as a result of his fantastic play. I think Chartier's got a lot more confidence on his back now, and I think he's going to be a big key piece for the Cubs going into round two.
Richard, so let's also say Signoretti, 7 goals, 4 assists in this series. He leads the playoff scoring race once again. The guy's just been having an incredible couple of seasons, guys. Mayo, Richard, 5 points in 4 games as well. I mean, it's not Signoretti numbers, but the kid's a rookie. What an incredible season he had. Tell us about his performance and just, your impressions of the way that your Storm played in this series.
Yeah, Mayo was really good in this series. He did some things that a 16-year-old kid's not supposed to do at the junior A level. He made a lot of plays. He did a lot of good things. The minutes he was lugging, you could see though that playing against older players, 19 and 20-year-olds, he was fatigued near the end of this series too. Even though he would never admit to that, young bodies against old bodies is a tough thing to do. He played really well. Maverick Fletcher's, I talked to the goaltending coach. He's a big money goaltender, and he's always been that way. So he was solid in the series for them. Justin Sullivan, at a different day, a different time, may have been the guy that was the money goalie for them in this series, and maybe turned it around. Fletcher was terrific, and he got the nod after he came in game one in relief, and they should have won game three in that series. 2 crossbars and a goal post, and it was just a missed assignment in the overtime that caused Signoretti to get so open. And one of the kind of unsung heroes for Sudbury in that series was what's his name, McCartney. And I thought he played really well. He was solid on the faceoffs, good, responsible defensively. And you always have those guys that step up in the playoffs. And I thought he was one of the ones that really, really elevated his game, because some of the ones you expected to see a little more from. I expected to see more offensive thrust from a Dax Klinkhammer, a little more offensive creativity from a couple other players too with major junior experience. But McCartney, for me, was the guy that really, really stepped his game up in that series.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Andrew, Dennis, what were your impressions? Whoever wants to take it of that first round series between Sudbury and Iroquois Falls.
Well, I had a chance to watch quite a few of the games between Iroquois Falls and Sudbury, and God, Iroquois Falls, you give them 7 more minutes in game 2, and that game goes to overtime and then some, because they had everything going. And you got to love watching Maverick Fletcher. He stood on his head. He played well. And, you guys were also mentioning about Jordan Mayo. He's 16. The future of this kid, if he stays in this league, the future of this kid is bright. He works hard. This Iroquois Falls team has a bright future. I think they need to add a few more pieces to the puzzle, but once they do that, I think next year their stock's going to rise big time.
Yeah, Andrew, what was? Did you get a chance to check out a couple games?
Yeah, I did, absolutely, and I agree with everyone here. Game 3 was the backbreaker, obviously, taking that game to overtime with a couple of late goals, and then it doesn't go their way, so it's so tough to come back, just even mentally from a 3-0 deficit. But I will piggyback on Dennis's point too. Like, that's such a young group, and if they can get a lot of returnees next year, that they can make some serious noise. One other note was obviously Mason Chitteroni, unfortunately getting injured. I believe that was in game 3. I'm not sure what the update is there, but that's obviously a major piece for them moving forward. So hopefully he can get back into it at some point. But great dominant performance. I was one thing else I'll say is, a little surprised they went with Chartier all 4 games compared to Noah Bone, but hey, sometimes a coach just likes to pick a goalie and just run with them.
Thomas, do you have an update for us on Chitteroni by any chance that you're allowed to tell us anyway?
Unfortunately, I cannot give an update on Mason Chitteroni right now, but I did look back at the injury. It didn't look great, and keep in mind he got injured in the last game of 2024 against the Espanola Paper Kings. That kept him out for about a month or so, and unfortunately it's the same leg that's been bugging him, which is very, very unfortunate. I haven't seen him in town since they left for Iroquois Falls. So unfortunately, I don't have an update on him, but I'm sure I'm going to find out at the rink when Game 1 starts on Thursday.
Chitteroni was out for a bit this season too, wasn't he? Am I thinking of someone else, or was it Chitteroni? He was injured.
Chitteroni was the big one that was hurt. Sinaway has been dealing with injury trouble as well.
Yeah.
Rubik has been as well. The Cubs have been stricken with the injury bug a lot this year. Which could be a problem going into round 2, but at least they had some time off. Almost 2 weeks have gone by now for the Cubs, so we'll see if they're well and rested. Maybe we'll see Chitteroni back. We unfortunately won't know until they drop the puck for Game 1 in the second round.
Yeah, impressive. Just shows once again that Sudbury depth, just how good it's been this year. Let's move on to Hearst and Powassan. I think this is the series that surprised us the least, folks. Hearst took them down 4-0. Hearst so strong this year, and Powassan they slid into the playoffs. I think this is me going through going through the drop down schedule, by my count, they won 3 of their last 20 games going back to the regular season. You hate to go into the playoffs that way, but Dennis, you had a front row seat. Tell us about what you saw in this series against the Voodoos.
Well, one thing about Powassan, they had a few leads in the series, but just could not find a way to cash in and hold the lead at all. I thought Hearst's depth was a huge part of this series, and when they needed a little bit of extra scoring, they got it. Was very impressed with Wilpock. He had a couple of nice goals, several nice goals for the Lumberjacks in the whole series that made a big difference. And Austin Seibel, I don't know about you guys, but I love Austin Seibel in net. I was kind of surprised that he didn't play the whole series, but he did struggle. Tyson Wilcox came in, did a decent job, but Seibel, I thought game 3 and 4, tried to hold the 40 best he could. Game 4, the way it was headed, I thought game 4 was headed towards Powassan. They were up by 2. They got there. The game went to overtime. And then all of a sudden, Tyler Patterson, give him the puck, power play, give him an open lane to shoot. And it's usually in the back of the net, the former Timmins Rock forward. But, this Hearst team, I think, is more dynamic than they've had in the past. I interviewed Adam Schillinglaw a few hours ago for my podcast, and he's had such a great year, and the team is ready. It's been a long layoff, like you mentioned, Thomas, 2 weeks or so far? It's been something like that. So that first game's going to be a little squeaky for both Greater Sudbury and Hearst coming forward.
Yeah, I thought game 4 as well was going to was going to go to Powassan, but Hearst just never says die, and came back and won. Did you guys see, speaking of Seibel, what I think was one of the plays it's one of the saves of the year that I threw up actually as a reel on Instagram, where he got the paddle down. There we go, Andrew's back. Did you guys see the save I'm talking about? Definitely one of the saves of the year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've seen some really good saves, but this was the save of the year right here. I think it's fair to say.
Do you think though?
Well, it could be.
There's been some good ones. It's so
there have been, but to do that on a big stage like the playoffs, I think is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the NOJHL one. I think of the one, I can't remember who was in goal for French River, who absolutely robbed. 2 of them happened when Courtney Kenny was calling games in Powassan right in front of him, so he could remind you about who it was who made the stop. I can't remember, but yeah, I have to put together a compilation of saves of the year, goals of the year, all that stuff, because so many good ones this year. Guys, anyone else want to chime in about the Hearst series? Was it sort of what you were expecting to happen?
I'll talk briefly about it. I wanted to give Powassan a chance. I really thought they were going to turn things around in the playoffs, but unfortunately that didn't happen. And like Dennis said, they had the lead. They were up, I think it was Dennis, 2-0 in the first period early, and then
3-1, I think, at one point as well, wasn't it?
But then from then on, Hearst just took over the series. Hearst outscored them 7-4, 7-2, 7-3, and 4-3. And outscored them 25-12. And the shots in game 4 were 56-26 in favor of Hearst. If it wasn't for the goaltending, that game would have ended in regulation very, very quickly. Very unfortunate result for the Powassan Voodoos, but like you said, only winning 3 of their last 20 games going back to the regular season is not good enough going into the playoffs, and they just could not get stuff string together. I feel really bad for the Voodoos, but I'm not surprised that Hearst won this series, but I wasn't expecting a sweep of this magnitude.
Who's got a dog, guys? We can hear him. Bring him on, Richard. What kind of dog you got? What is it?
It's a golden doodle. He'll probably put his paw down if we put the team logos down and pick better than we could.
Awesome. Good dogs, man. I love them. Really quick. Donheaven Vea. By the way, Dennis, Donheaven Vea, right? That's correct.
You could use the name Donovan if you wanted to really anglicize it. Donovan Veu, he's a kid from the East Coast. They brought him in last year, and he's really been tearing it up between him, Aiden Kalin, and Adi Willette. They've been a terrific line for them most of the year for the Lumberjacks. Very impressive to watch. A lot of speed that they generate when they're on the ice.
2 things. Number one, with the last name like Bastyovanszky, I don't need to anglicize. I really like to try to at least make an effort to get people's last names right. And secondly, 10 points in 4 games. Verveya, Schillinglaw, your MVP choice, Dennis. 8 points in 4 games as well. Just unreal on D. Guys, anyone else want to chime in of the series?
I just want to say my prediction came true. It was the shortest series of the first round, and it was 4-0, and it was the first one done. And Powassan limped into the playoffs, as I said. And if the season was probably 2 weeks longer, Espanola and Iroquois Falls might have been the 7-8 teams, and Powassan might have been on the outside looking in. So I didn't have a lot of faith in them going to the playoffs. I do like Cybel in net, and I said if I was coaching, he should be starting. But they didn't really show me a lot this year that made me think that they could even try to match with Hearst's firepower and speed that they have and depth of the roster. So not a shock at all in that first round series.
Let's talk about the Timmins series then, and we're going to start obviously with Andrew on this, who was calling the games at home for the Rock, and it was a good one. We thought this was going to be definitely one of the best ones here. Let me just remove this and put. There he is. Andrew, we thought this was going to be, the Timmins series, definitely one of the best series, if not the best series. And I would have to put Blind River, probably the Blind River Soo Thunderbirds series ended up being the absolute pinnacle. But Timmins was a close second, man. It was a great series. The Rock taken in 6 games. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, well, this series was obviously a little bit unique. It had the 2-3-2 format, which no one else did. They had to play 3 games back to back in Michigan. The biggest thing for this series was goaltending. Obviously, just a ton of shots. If you look at the shot totals, particularly the 3 games in Soo, Michigan, it was about 50 shots for both goaltenders, and none of those games even went to overtime. It's not like it went 5-6 periods. Just a ton of rubber for these young goalies. The Eagles were going with a platoon situation with Mason Burks, who I noticed you guys didn't really talk about much in the first round preview. I thought he's an outstanding young goaltender. He got hurt a little bit partway through the season, but he came back and he's had some big games against Timmins. Jace Kennerly also put out an outstanding effort, but again they just couldn't quite get the scoring at the right times, the Eagles, and Timmins was able to finish them off at home. Ryan Riley was outstanding throughout the series, and Timmins was able to get the depth scoring they needed as well.
When the Eagles went up 2-0 in Game 6, I was telling Ted Gooch afterwards, I was like, oh boy, because I did not. I mean, if you're a Timmins Rock fan, you did not want that series going 7 games to give Soo that kind of momentum, right? So, but no, really admirable job by the Rock. Listen, kudos to the Soo Eagles as well, who had a great run this season. I think at one point they were on a 10-game winning streak. They were in the CJHL top 20 for a good portion of the season. But the Rock just got going late in the season, Andrew. They really, really found that they hit their stride, and it just continued on into the playoffs. Just a really solid effort. Guys, who else wants to jump in about the Timmins series?
Well, guys, I had a chance to see a little bit of that series, and I'll tell you, there were more shots on net at one point than there were tariffs in the United States. That's how wild the shots on
painful discussion right now.
There you go.
Well done.
I thought I'd have some fun with that. At any rate, great series. Timmins has to learn to start on time. Falling behind 2-0 early was a big issue, but then they score the 5 straight goals. They've got to find a way to get more depth. In this series, I think lack of depth hurt them. You mentioned about Burks. We talked about him in our preview show. I really liked him out of Texas because he's a Texan. He's pretty sharp, but you're right. The Eagles just could not get enough scoring when it counted, and I think that hurt them. I do like the format 2-3-2. I think that should be looked at in the future for long distance travel. I think it works. I know some of the fans were not happy, voicing on social media about the late starts, about the format. They were given the city gears, which a lot of them were not very well informed. But 2-3-2 formats work, especially for travel. If you want to start looking at expenses, it's a way that things maybe have to be done in the future.
Andrew. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Thomas.
Yeah. Sorry. We talked about in the round 1 podcast about how the Soo Eagles were going to struggle with their lack of depth. And that came to fruition. We talked about how Cole Reggett was probably their best defender, and guess what? He gets hurt very early in the series. Andrew and I have been talking about them on our show, and they ran into some massive suspension problems, injuries, just nothing was going right for the Eagles. I was very surprised this went to 6, even though I did say Timmins was going to win this series at 7. Based on how things went for the Eagles, I was very surprised this even went to 6. But I mean, not to discredit the effort that they put in. The Eagles put together a really, really strong season, and at least they were able to make the playoffs this year. Because again, this was a team that, unfortunately missed out because of the division lineup last year. So I think this was a humongous win of a season for the Soo Eagles. I think they are going to be coming back even more stronger next year. But yeah, Timmins was just too much for them to handle.
Just a quick comment, Andrew. How good was Evan Hoagland, the AP? Absolute rock star, especially was it game 5 where he had the hat trick, I think. I mean, he was pretty impressive, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to mention that just with some of the guys potentially who could come back for the Eagles. Evan Hoagland, you look at his stats in the Northern Michigan U18 League, he had a monster season there, and he came right in and was a key contributor. If they can get him back next season, along with Paul Borozniak, obviously there's a few guys, Pouliot and Fredericks, who unfortunately didn't play in Game 6 due to injury. They're going to graduate, but if they can get Hoagland back, a full season from Cole Reggett, although he is an OHL draft pick, of course, so we'll see how these things go. But they've got some great pieces there, and what a great first season behind the bench for Jeremy Rebick as well. And we look for them to be another strong season for them next season.
Yeah. Let's chat about the last series of the opening round here, guys. Then Soo Thunderbirds taking down Blind River 4-3. I know Storm was texting me and trash talking me last night about how I called it right, unfortunately, in 7 games. But I think we all did. I'm trying to remember.
I know I called it. I said the Soo was going to win in 7.
It was because the T-Birds, there was playoff T-Birds and regular season T-Birds, and Metivier we thought was going to be the difference in that. Metivier came up absolutely massive. What a great series, though. We've got no Soo T-Birds or Blind River broadcasters. Richard, you chime in here, and you tell us what you thought of that series.
You know what? I thought that I think I called the Soo in 6 or 7 in that series. I think as you indicated, the playoff Thunderbirds were they are a different animal than they are the regular season. They build for the playoffs. In that series, it was surprising that the Soo outshot them the first 5 games of the series. And then in Game 6 and Game 7, Blind River did outshoot the Soo. But Metivier, when you watched him and you watched his posture in the net, and he was so dialed into every little aspect of the game. And then in Game 7, they got outshot by a ton. And he was just so dialed in early in the game. Gave them the lead. I think they were up 5-1 at one point, and then it was just cruise control the rest of the way to bring it home. And but he was really, really, really dialed in. And I think the depth too, the Soo scoring depth. I think they had a really balanced attack where every line could put the puck behind you, whereas Blind River didn't seem to have that in the series throughout. So I think that the Soo kudos for their victory in that series.
Well, we talked about how they were going to have to shut down Owen King. Now, Owen King still had a good series. They held him to 8 points in 7 games. So not at the pace he was at, certainly in the regular season. They did key in on him. James Legler led the series in scoring with 10 points in 7 games. There was a few guys for the Soo that really came through. And that experience, I feel like it really showed in Game 7. Like, first of all, Metivier was a rock star in that contest. He was fantastic in Game 7. Legler scored a beauty, but you could just feel that momentum, I feel like, shifting to the Thunderbirds after they took Game 6 as well. Who else wants to chime in here, guys? I'll shut up here. But I thought it was definitely the best series, the opening round. Sorry, Dennis, go ahead.
I loved it. I watched it last night. Kudos to the Blind River Community Center and the fans. That place was jammed last night. I know it's probably not a very big barn, but I was so impressed with the fans. The atmosphere is terrific. And you mentioned Noah Metivier. Earlier in the season, he didn't look himself. He looked a shadow of himself early on in the season. Hadn't played that well. Soo Thunderbirds are having their moments. But, boy, since about Christmas, New Year's on, he became that goalie that we know and expected. And kudos, though, to the Blind River Beavers. If they had a little bit more offense, perhaps they give it a go. But that was a fun series. I was one of the guys that you would have asked me 2 days ago, I would have picked Blind River. You would have asked me last night, I might have picked the Sioux. It just depends, what day of the week it was. That's how close that was. But good hockey. Sad to see a team lose there, but that's what happens.
Blind River was a great story this year. I really liked them. It was just interesting last night in the biggest game of the season. I thought they were a little flat. They just looked a little bit flat in that game, and unfortunate for them. But congrats to the Sioux Thunderbirds. And as we get into let's get into our preview then of the second round. Thomas, should the Cubs be a little bit nervous here with the fact that they're going up against a two-time champion Mativier, of course, their goalie from last year, as part of their run to the Centennial Cup. But number one seeded Sudbury, Sioux was, I believe, sixth seed, if I'm correct on that one. Going into this, the seeds mean absolutely nothing now. Let's start with you, Thomas, because of course you are going to be calling that series for the Cubs. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I don't know if the Cubs should be worried, but they definitely need to take note of Mativier. Obviously, but I think the Cubs have a little bit of advantage because they know how Mativier ticks. Obviously, with him going back to his hometown of Sault Ste. Marie, I think that was obviously a big decision for him to finish his junior A career where it all started. And like Dennis said, he did not look himself at the start of the year. I think it was like a 3.5 goals against average, I think, through like the first 10 games of the season. It was very surprising to someone for his nature. And then all of a sudden, come Christmas time, Mativier showing why he's a two-time playoff MVP and why he's a two-time NOJHL champion. I think that's going to be a challenge for the Cubs come this series, because keep in mind, we talked about the Thunderbirds and how they are, flying under everybody's radar, even though they shouldn't be. They are a totally different team when it comes to the playoffs. You got Jonathan Sonnedecker's playing well, like you said, James Legler. What a fantastic playoffs that young man is having. We finally, we've seen Jacob Smith and James Elliott finally come into fruition in the first series. And they've been getting some really great contributions from some very unlikely sources as well. They have a really good bottom six. I think that's really helped cement their scoring prowess this year. Their defense has been really fun there this year as well. But when you look at Greater Sudbury, we talked in the last podcast about who was going to be league MVP, and we said it was going to be Owen King. But I think Lucas Ignoretti has proven us why he was named the MVP for a second year in a row. He's already passed his career high for points in a single playoff campaign. He's been having a fantastic run so far. And, like Rick and Dennis even mentioned, Aidan McCartney, oh my gosh, this young kid from Kitchener has been an X factor in this playoffs so far. And I think he's someone that the Sioux's going to have to keep an eye on. In terms of how this series, I think, is going to go, Alex, I still like to think Sudbury has the odds-on favorite in this series. I do think this is going to go the distance, so I think we're going to see another 7-game set. We know the games are happening Thursday and Friday in Sudbury. We don't know the Sioux side just yet, because, that series just wrapped up a day ago as we're currently speaking, so they have to figure out what times and what days they're going to be playing these games, and even what rink they're going to be playing at, because especially with the Sioux Greyhounds still in action, and if there's something going on at the John Rhodes, they're going to have to find another place to play. But I don't think that should be an issue, but I do think Sudbury takes this one in 7.
Cubs won 2. They played 4 times. The Cubs had 2 wins. One was an OT. They tied, of course, on the opening game of the NOJHL season, and 1 loss. So, but all those games were within 1 goal of each other, except for the game that the Sioux won, which was a 4-2 contest. So these were tight games all season long. Dennis, give us about a minute here. What's your take on the series?
Well, I agree with Thomas. I think Sudbury wins the series, but I think it's going to go 6. Here's a couple takeaways from this. 1, the Sioux needs to continue to get depth. Metivier stands on his head again. Who knows what can happen there? Secondly, I think Greater Sudbury needs to make a goaltending addition. I think Bowen needs to play at least 1 game in the series. Kind of throw a curveball. Things kind of don't happen first 2 games. You got a 7-game series. Give the kid a chance to take the rock. let them play a game, let them play maybe game 2 or start them game 1 just to kind of throw a curveball, get the kid some action, because if something happens, you put a kid in cold, you don't have that issue. But again, depth and scoring. Greater Sudbury needs to find more offense. Lucas Signoretti, if they find a way to shut him down, someone else has got to step up for Daryl Moxham's charges. But 6 games, I like Greater Sudbury to move into the final.
Okay, Richard, how about you?
In 4 games this year versus the Sioux, Lucas Signoretti had 3 points. I went through the game sheets and I found that out. So they either inadvertently found a way to shut him down or game planned around shutting him down. He had 3 goals. That's all he had in those 4 games.
Wow. That's interesting. That's a good stat, yeah.
Metivier is the goaltending edge. Chartier played great in game 4 in the first period against Iroquois Falls. Otherwise, he didn't really give me that championship caliber goaltending performance. He's good. But at the other end of the ice, I think Maverick Fletcher outplayed him, just that the depth of Sudbury's firepower was there. I think Metivier gives them the advantage in goal. If Mason Chitteroni doesn't return, I think Sudbury is in trouble on the back end. He's about a 25 to 30 minute plus guy a game and major junior experience, and I don't think they've got the depth defensively. I'm going to say that the Sioux takes this series in 7 games if Chitteroni doesn't play.
Wow.
I was going to say, it sounded like you were leaning towards an upset there. So interesting call. It's like you guys said, the Thunderbirds are just an entirely different team in the playoffs. Andrew, you've been listening patiently. What's your take on it?
Well, the big thing here for the Thunderbirds is you've got to stay out of the box as best as possible. They got to figure out a way to play gritty, play tough against these very skilled forwards from the Cubs. But if you have a parade to the penalty box, they're going to make you pay, particularly on home ice. They're so tough to beat on that big ice at the Jerry McCrory Community Center there. So they got to figure out a way to do it. Keep playing gritty without taking too many penalties here. Again, the Metivier factor is such an interesting part of this series, having played for both teams, having won a championship with both teams. But I do think ultimately Sudbury's probably going to have a little bit too much for them. Who knows? We've counted out the Thunderbirds before at our own peril, of course. But I think ultimately Sudbury takes this one in 6 as well.
26 straight wins at home for the Greater Sudbury Cubs, dating back to earlier this season. Their last loss came all the way back in September against Hearst. So, and like you mentioned, they tied against the Sioux Thunderbirds in the first game. So since then, Sudbury has only surrendered 1 regulation loss at home. So we'll see what happens.
And what that first game, and for the first week of the season, it was funny, Thomas, because Lucas Signoretti hardly put up any points. I think it took him about a week and a half to get going. And then, of course, we all know the story after that. So that was part of that slow start for Lucas at the beginning of the season. But I've been super impressed by what I've seen from the T-Birds. Metivier is an X factor. There's no question about it. Sudbury's just been so good. Their consistency all through the season. And I think their depth is shining through right now with some of the injuries we've seen. I'm going to take Sudbury. It is going to be in 7 games. I think it's going to be a real tight one. Two great coaches. Just a fantastic series. I mean, realistically though, between these 2 series, which is the better one? I mean, they're both going to be spectacular. Let's move to the second one, which is second seeded Hearst taking on is it 4th seeded Timmins? Is that right? Yeah, 4th seeded Timmins. The Jacks won 4 times they played. Lumberjacks won 2, lost 1, and tied 1, so they had the slight edge. But as we know, Timmins down the stretch was a much different team than they were at the beginning and even the mid part of the season. It was really that last month and a half, couple months of the season that they really, really turned it on. Andrew, you obviously witnessed the entire thing. So let's go to you first. What's your take on this series?
Well, first of all, I want to say it's really funny how we've got this new playoff format. Everyone in lumps in one big group, but ultimately what we see here is a classic East versus West finals anyways, with the old Thunderbirds and Cubs and Hearst and Timmins. So this is probably going to be another spicy series. Of course, if anyone's been paying attention to this league for the last several years, this is maybe the best rivalry in junior hockey in Ontario. I know there's lots of great rivalries out there, but these two fan bases do not like each other. That's an understatement. The teams do not like each other. There's a ton of history. They both like to invade each other's barns. Just a 3-hour trip down the road. It's just, there's so many good factors here. Of course, Dennis mentioned Powassan earlier, former Rock. He always loves playing at the MAC. There's just so many little nuances to this series, and it's going to be great. And I think both of these teams, like you mentioned, played 6 times during the regular season, 3 wins for Hearst, 2 for Timmins, and then the tie on Family Day. And I think actually these two teams are fairly evenly matched. They match up well. They both kind of have elements that maybe the other one doesn't have. Like you say, young goaltenders in this series too. Alex Bastyovanszky is a rookie. Dryden Riley is still a 17-year-old, despite playing massive minutes throughout the season. I think it's just going to be a fantastic series, and don't be shocked if this one goes the distance as well.
Who are you picking? You got to pick the Rock, right?
Oh, well, here's the thing. I think if Timmins if they're going to win this series, they have to win one of those first 2 games in Hearst. If they go down 0-2, I think it's going to be real tough to win 4 of 5.
Right.
If Timmins can win one of the first 2 in Hearst, I think they've got a pretty good chance. If they can get that done, I'll say Timmins in 7. But
a good honest answer. I want to ask you one thing before we jump to Dennis really quickly. In Timmins, for like seasons ticket holders, because I know you got a lot of them, is it like reserved seating, or is it a first come first serve kind of thing?
No, so I think Timmins might be the only rink. I don't know if there's other, but it's maybe the only rink in the NOJHL that has assigned seating. You can choose your seat. Season ticket holders have specific seats. Those are their seats. I know. I believe that they have that in Hearst as well. But
right.
it's you can go on their website and see exactly which seats you want to grab. And we're getting better start times in this series, at least here in Timmins as well. There's a lot of hockey tournaments going on throughout Timmins the last few weeks here. So, and some bad weather too, which also hurt the gate there. But I think there's going to be some massive crowds in this series.
So get there early if you don't have a reserved seat, or there's going to be a Hearst invasion there. And most likely Timmins fans are going to travel well to Hearst as well. Let's jump to Dennis here. Dennis, what's your take on this series? Lumberjacks against the Rock, old school rivalry. What are you thinking?
Well, here's the best thing about it, and Andrew jumped on it right away. This is great for not only the NOJHL, but great for the economy. You've got 2 teams 3 hours away. You're going to see lots of travel. A lot of fan bases going back and forth. As long as Mother Nature cooperates and doesn't give us any more weird storms, we should be good. And that's going to be, I think, a huge, huge benefit to both, the Hearst Lumberjacks and Claude LaRose Recreation Center. I think one of the better atmospheres in the NOJHL, bar none. The fans really get into it because of its square corners. Really another neat place to play. Key in this series is depth. Can Timmins get more depth in scoring besides Kelly, MacArthur, Romanuk? They need to find some back-end scoring. They have to get that if they're going to get anywhere. I think the key on all this, too, for Hearst is they got to limit their turnovers, and really they're going to have to get that goaltending again from Alex Bastyovanszky. He was really, really good in that first series, and he has been a PTPer when it comes to the postseason, and he's going to be ready to go. I was excited when I saw this matchup last night. I knew it was a possibility to go, and I think it's either going to go 6 or 7, but it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And Hearst, I'm going to say Hearst in 6. I think it's going to be a great series. And Andrew's right. If Timmins doesn't find a way to win one of those 2 games, that could be a bit of an issue.
One of the things I love about covering this league is someone who covered the OJHL for years, of course, which is a Toronto-based league, and he'd have teams complaining if they had to travel an hour sometimes, is that 3 hours is considered a nice, close, nice, easy hop up there to go between games. So it's going to be so much fun for sure. Let's see. Let's go to Richard, and then we'll do Thomas afterwards. Richard, what's your take?
I think Hearst has too much depth for Timmins. Like, there was really no home ice advantage in this series of games throughout the regular season. Hearst was 2-1 at home and 1-1 in Timmins. So really there was nothing there for home ice advantage. Hearst had 5 guys in the top 10 in scoring for depth. They had 7 players with over 50 points. Timmins had 2. They have the advantage in goaltending with Riley and net. Boivin a rookie. I'm sure that he's going to play well and be enough for his team. But up front, there's just too much depth on Hearst and too much firepower. And again, we've got an Adam Schilling-Law, and I'll draw that analogy to when the Huskies won the Memorial Cup. Noah Dobson playing 30, 35 minutes a night. Schilling-Law is that kind of guy for Hearst. They do have some other players back there. Like, they've got good, solid top four defensemen that can play. Timmins has Sear and Nyman, and after that, it's a big drop-off in my mind. So I think the speed and the firepower of Hearst can exploit that. I think the Lumberjacks are going to win this in 5, maybe 6 games.
Interesting. Thomas, how about you?
Yeah, if you're in Hearst or Timmins, you want to get your tickets very quick. These are two barns that have the biggest capacity in the NOJHL. They both seat well over 1,000 people, and like Dennis and Andrew said, fans are going to turn out in droves for this series because these are two teams that do not like one another. To me, this rivals almost a Montreal and Toronto rivalry in the National Hockey League. It is that heated. I think I have to agree with Dennis and Richard. I think the depth for Hearst is going to be a little bit too much for Timmins to handle. I do think the Rock will make this a series. However, I am going to say Hearst in 6. Based on the fact that, again, Richard rattled off all those players that finished with 50-plus points and were in the top 10 of scoring. Can Dryden and Riley be able to handle that pressure? Because keep in mind, when he went to the U17s, he was going up against some of the best 17-year-olds in the world.
Yeah.
Mind you, this is not a great comparison. I will say that. He's not going up against some of the best players from the U.S. National Development Program, but he is going up against arguably the best top 6, I would dare say, in junior A hockey this season. I know the Cubs have had a good top 6, but Hearst is, in my mind, the best top 6 bar none. So I think this is going to be a heck of a test for Dryden Raleigh. I do think this goes 6 games to Hearst's way, but if you don't have your popcorn and your seatbelt ready to go, you better get it ready because this is going to be a rock'em sock'em series, and I'm going to try and catch every single game that I possibly can.
Is it going to get a bit testy, boys?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The officials are going to have their hands full. There's going to be a lot of extra pushing and shoving between these two clubs. I mean, me and Andrew have talked a lot this year, too, about, passionate fan base in Hearst. But, boy, when their team is rolling, they get real, real rowdy. Timmins has some hardcore fans, too. I think this is going to be a very passionate series. Hopefully nothing obviously nothing too severe happens in this series, but I do think that the players are going to leave it all out on the ice, and come the end of the day, no matter who makes the NOJHL final, I think it's a massive win for Northern Ontario.
Just two more things. Sorry, real quick here. We also have the interesting factor of Alex Bastyovanszky facing his older brother Patrick, of course, former league champion with the Rock a couple years ago, who's now an assistant coach with Timmins.
Right.
Him and Kyle Trache have been kind of in and out on the bench this season, so that's another kind of interesting factor. It'll be fun for the parents there. They're really nice people as well. One more name I want to throw out there that's maybe one of the best kept secrets in the NOJHL is a defenseman by the name of Matthew Kim. He hasn't been with the team for that long. They picked him up towards the trade deadline. This guy can skate like the wind, and he had a fantastic series in that series against the Soo Eagles. He's going to be a big factor in this series.
7, wasn't he? Sorry, Game 6. He was big in Game 6, wasn't he?
Absolutely. Game changer.
Yeah.
And Andrew was saying about Timmins, adding the Timmins majors forward, and his name escapes me. Etherington, is that his name?
Eden Etheridge.
Yeah, Etheridge. He is going to be a primetime player, and if he stays in the NOJHL and becomes a player in the NOJHL, he's going to be fun to watch. I saw him enough a little bit with the Timmins majors, and I like the kid. I think the kid's that's a nice pickup in the postseason for the Timmins Rock and for their coaching staff.
Well, it's going to be a fantastic series. Just to continue the point about Riley, 17 years old, guys. Normally, goalies, to have the kind of poise that he has at 17 years old, normally that's an older position, if you know what I mean, in junior hockey. Those are the guys that dominate between the posts. Team Canada East this year for, the World Junior A Challenge. Super, super impressive. I'm looking at the regular season scoring in the top 10. The Lumberjacks had 5 guys in the top 10 of the league scoring, led of course by Como with 67, Patterson 65. Timmins didn't really have sort of that game breaker offensively as good as like Romanuk was. Andrew, I mean, you got 5 of them on Hearst, from an offensive standpoint. That being said, I really like the way that Timmins has played down the stretch. Like I think I mentioned on the last podcast when I talked to Ted Gooch earlier in the season, president of the Rock, and I said, "What's going on?" He's like, "We have not even scratched the surface of our potential. We're not playing the way that we can. We'll get it going. Just wait." And they sure did. So I think it's going to be an amazing series. I think it's going 7. Which would just be even more fun for the fans. Obviously, I'm going to call Hearst. I think that their depth, they've just done it all season long. It's like Sudbury, why I called Sudbury. They've just been so consistent all season long. They're firing on all cylinders after winning 4 straight. You could maybe say that Timmins is a little bit more battle tested, but Hearst is going to be well rested too. Right. So, but listen, it could go either way. I think it's going to be just a great series. It's going to be a fun Final Four, guys. But before we sign off, anyone want to add anything to this about with the way the playoffs have gone so far? Your impressions of it, what to expect?
I mean, obviously the first round I think was a huge success for the NOJHL. A lot of people have been talking about it. It's been a chaotic 2 weeks. I think it's fair to say, like, the first round's already flown by. We're in the month of April, and we're getting one step closer to crowning an NOJHL champion. I think it's been a lot of fun, not just for the fans and the players, but us broadcasters as well. The fan support's been fantastic across the league all year long. I don't expect that to stop anytime soon. I think this is the best chance that the NOJHL will have at the Centennial Cup this year. I really do. I think it's going to be a lot stronger. No matter which of the 4 teams goes to the national championships in Calgary, I think the NOJHL will be well represented. We got 4 amazing hockey clubs, and funny enough, all 4 of them recent NOJHL champions. So we'll see what happens here in round 2.
And who knows what's going to happen next season, guys?
Yeah.
With the fact that with these new NCAA changes, what's going to happen? Like, I mean, we're all going to be here, but what exactly is going to happen with players going in and going out? It's you talk to so many general managers, and they still don't even know yet what the ramifications. I mean, overall, I've always said I think it's best. It's best for the players. There's no question about it to have more options out there. But it's going to be interesting to see. Like, this is the last sort of Centennial Cup that we're going to have before all these changes go into effect in mid-August, I think it is, when the changes actually go into effect. So it's going to be fun to see. But before we sign off, anyone else with any thoughts or?
Well, here's the thing. I'm hoping that D1, D3 scouts really have a good look at these 2 series. One thing I've always said about junior hockey at this level is this is where you're going to get your opportunity to get your players and to really do some deep scouting. And I hope we see a lot of flow hockey being used by D1, D3 scouts to really look at these kids. I'm a big proponent of the NCAA. I was involved with an organization that moved on close to 120 kids in 10 years. So I'm hoping the NCAA really takes a really good look at the NOJHL. I really love where it's headed. I love where it's going. Thomas said it best. This has been a great for the NOJHL, great series, great depth. Who knows what's going to happen next year, but let's enjoy the moment now. And yes, the NOJHL, whoever gets out of here, goes to the Centennial Cup in Calgary, Alberta. I think they're going to give any of those teams a run for the money. I've watched some of the Saskatchewan League this year. I've watched a little bit of Manitoba, a little bit of Alberta, but I think Ontario has been, Ontario and the NOJHL has got a lot right now.
I'll just quickly chime in about that too, Dennis, about D3 and D1 schools watching. That is so, number one, you guys are all part of excellent broadcasts. Like, obviously up there, the best in the league. It's so important to have those good quality broadcasts. If you're a D3 school or a D1 school, you want to tune in. This is a fact. You want to tune in to games that are clear, that you can see, that you can identify players properly. It just makes it more of an enjoyable viewing experience, and it helps when you can identify who the players are that are skating around as well. Well, they've got it. That's why camera work is so important. So I mean, all the broadcasts that you guys are on this year just have been absolutely spectacular, guys. So, kudos on that. Yeah, we should wrap it up here, guys. I always say we want to talk for half an hour, and then we end up talking for, the better parts of 3/4 of an hour at least. But guys, we'll do this again, obviously, for championship series, and it's going to be a ton of fun. You guys have just done such a great job all year long. We still get to hear all of you except for Richard, but he's retired, so he's going to get to watch a lot more, a lot of these games anyways. So, but
Geez, I was gonna say something nice about NOJHL Game Day and the positive feedback we've got over the course of the year for the YouTube clips, and but we really got some good positive exposure over the podcast pre-playoffs.
Yes,
a lot of real good comments from a lot of fans that watched it, and real diehard hockey fans. So, Alex, our hat goes off to you too for putting this all together for the league.
Thank you, guys. No, I appreciate it. And it's a different animal, isn't it? It's apples and oranges. Like one show we do throughout the season, which we try to make maybe 5, 6, sometimes 7 minutes kind of thing that serves a purpose. And then this is just something entirely different. Not everyone's got the, with the way our society is going to move so quick, not everyone wants to sit down for 45 minutes to an hour and watch something, right? They may only want to watch 5 to 6 minutes of a show. So they both sort of serve different purposes, but listen, hopefully people are entertained by it. And you guys have been a huge part of that success. Whenever I've needed you guys, for interviews throughout the season, I'm not saying goodbye here because we've still got one more round to go, guys. But just to further your point, you guys have been excellent, of course. As a guy who hadn't, I've always followed the NOJHL because I follow all the junior hockey leagues across Canada. I'm a junior A junkie, but you guys really helped to get me into the league in terms of introducing me to some of the important stuff, some of the historical facts, some of the greatest matchups. And I can't thank you guys enough for doing that throughout the season. But like I said, we're not done yet, right? We'll do this again for the final series. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the games. It's going to be fun listening to Thomas, Andrew, and Dennis as they call them for their respective teams. Richard and I will be sitting on the sidelines watching it with a bag of popcorn in our hands throughout the Final Four. But gentlemen, thank you. Thank you, everybody at home, for watching. And just a reminder, of course, all throughout the playoffs, you can stay up to date with everything that's going on. Statistics, great stories, game pictures, all that great stuff by checking out the NOJHL's official social media outlets. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later on.